As we ask listeners and readers to share what they're tolerating in their homes, we've heard a common theme. Parents are tired of feeling unheard, oppressed, unworthy, and worn down. Well, we can talk about changing our mindsets and having an attitude of gratitude all day, but really it's not just about, lacing our lives with toxic positivity, but in really finding significance and meaning in our lives.
Yeah, and that can be found in places that you might not expect.
Mama says namaste. Mama says namaste.
Making a family can be easy and fun.
Oh yeah, but raising a family can be a whole different story.
From spouses to kids to the crazy daily grind, life often directs us away from connection and more into reactive chaos.
If you're tired of that cycle and are seeking something beyond the picket fence blues, this is the show for you.
I'm Ashley.
And I'm Nathan.
And we're here to take you from chaos to clarity by bringing awareness and intention into your home, not waiting for one day, and highlighting how
the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us.
Take a deep breath in and let's start a brand new day. With Mama says namaste.
There are times when we start these podcast episodes and, oh man, I have so many avenues that we could go down. It's hard to condense it.
Is it a book writing podcast kind of thing?
Oh my goodness, there's so much. There's so many ways that we can go. And in light of today's topic, as we were just looking for ways to support those of you who are feeling, unheard, unworthy, unloved, pressed down, frustrated, feeling like you're just kind of giving up, checking out, burning out, all of these different things. What can we give you? What support can we give? Nathan and I have both been reading 2 powerful books, and here I'm sitting here trying to figure out, okay, how can we compile all this information from the books? And basically it's going to be like 10 podcast episodes. So we can't quite, give everything in here, but we wanted to just kind of lay out some key things that have kind of been ringing true to us as we've, or kind of, I guess we find affirmations in the things that we've been reading that have really helped us to see how we're creating the life we are.
Right. I mean, sometimes it is easy to kind of, for life to do us, for life to take us away. And we don't have a whole lot of control over it, or we just kind of come into, okay, well, this is the way it is. I mean, I was talking to a guy this morning who he studied to be an electrical engineer and then got his degree and got his job, and he was in a cubicle looking at a computer, and he's like, I don't want to do this. I want to do stuff with electricity. Like, I've been poking stuff in electrical holes my whole life. I want to do it, more of that. And it was like, oh no, this is what you do. You're doing figures. You're doing math on the computer all day. And
he rose to a level that then took him away from the things he found joy in.
Absolutely. It took, but how quickly he walked away from that life. But how quickly we say, well, okay, I got to try it.
Yeah.
And then you get kind of hooked into, well, I've already, got so much invested in the 401k, and well, now I know everybody here, and now really, I've moved to the next level really quickly, or
yeah.
And I mean that kind of happened to me at the bank. I mean, I went up pretty quickly for not having any financial experience.
Well, yeah.
I'll pat myself on the back.
And that was a direct testament to the power of relationships.
Absolutely.
And you fostering relationships and seeing the humans behind the business. And I think that's why you rose up. But what you're talking about and what you're referencing here is what can be referred to as the Peter Principle.
Yes.
And it's that idea of, you rise to your level of inadequacy, or you rise up until you start to move away from that which you are so great at.
Right. That is that which kind of drove your purpose, your desire.
Yeah.
And how quickly we can forget about that, or that's child's play. I mean, I think that it's really easy for us as adults to put on our adult hat and say, well, I'm adulting right now. I don't get the luxury of pleasure until everybody else has gone to bed. Well, that's one way of doing it, and I've done it that way. But there's also another way where I can enjoy my experience, and they can enjoy their experience. And if they are screaming into my experience, I can communicate, hey, this is the impact you have. You're affecting me.
Yeah.
And how often we just avoid that, and we kind of put on our armor of martyrdom and march on. I know I've done that. You've done that before. You've been an excellent martyr.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, muscle through, carry the burdens of everyone else so they don't have to, and in the process, destroy myself.
And that's what we don't always realize, is the destructive nature that we are actually doing to ourselves. And I think that's what has come to my attention so much recently, and you and I discussing just the impact of our mindset and how we decide how we're going to do the day has a tremendous impact on your health. We don't take for granted as much the impact, our mind-body connection. We're starting to accept that, and we're starting to have a better idea of what that looks like. But when we go to the emergency room, we know daggone well we're going to a flesh mechanic.
Yeah. We're going to fix the symptom. We're going to fix the symptom on our body. Most often when you're in the ER, I mean, there's a time and place for that. When you're in triage, when you're in an ER, you're stopping the bleeding. You're not going to, are you happy at home?
Right.
What kind of conversations have you been having? Do you feel worthiness in your life? We're not going to those points, but really ultimately, those questions are the questions to be asked for what illnesses are showing up,
right,
for what physical ailments are showing up. And that's the thing that's been really prevalent in our minds. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them being how much illness we see. And we've referenced this before, coming out of 2020 and everything that that the whole world has struggled with navigating a pandemic. And with that, people were kind of challenged to face the reality of the life they had created. And what we saw is oftentimes those that suffered the worst from COVID, there were underlying symptoms. There were other things that were involved. It was like what COVID did was it awakened whatever weaknesses you had in your body, and it made them even more extreme.
Exaggerated them.
And I look at the prevalence of cancer in our world, and I think about even my own family history in cancer. And as I tried to find reasoning, some sense of meaning as to why is it that when I had, out of my aunts and uncles, why is it that I had 3 aunts all diagnosed with cancer, 2 of which lead horribly unhealthy lives as far as their diet and their health. When it comes to their physical fitness and their diet, their life was full of not taking care of their physical body. And then my aunt, who lived by juicing, who never smoked a cigarette, who was active till her dying day, died in her 40s. Why did my aunt, who by all physical appearances, who looked so healthy, why did she die? Why did my other 2 aunts, who by all physical appearances should be at death's door, or who are still alive and in remission? The biggest thing that I see as a distinction between those is the amount of stress and martyrdom that my quote-unquote physically healthy aunt carried till the day she died. The denial of her own, the denial of facing maybe what stressors she had in her life.
Well, when you're mad and you don't express it,
yes,
it takes on a physical aspect in your body that then becomes kind of like, after it's first taken on your grip, if you're not letting go of it and processing it, then you're kind of constricting it and mashing it, almost like one of those those presses when you're a kid that, you twist it in your grandparents' woodshed and it holds the board, whatever that thing is called, the holder. I used to call it the holder.
What?
It had
The vice?
The vice!
Vice.
Yeah, the vice. The holder.
Okay.
I was always good in a shop. At any rate, the vice, it's kind of like that. You just mash it down into who you are. And it just becomes this layer, this low hum of discomfort, of frustration, of anger that, well, I'll put that aside. And then something happens and it reemerges because of something that somebody did or said. And you just keep mashing that down. And if that's the mode, I was reading this in this book, that energy has to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
When you see geese, I've used this analogy before, but when you see geese getting onto each other or fighting or hissing or attacking each other, after they've chased each other around, both of them will be on their separate areas and they will flap their wings and do their thing, and that's expressing out that emotion physically to get it out of their body so they don't hold it.
Yeah, it's expressing that energy, and that's what that's part of what we want to address here, is that it's not a denial of emotion. We talk about having an attitude of gratitude, being grateful for things. We talk about finding the light in life. We talk about going toward what you want. And all of that does not directly equate to denial of what you don't want or repressing the feelings of what you don't want. And Nathan and I are no stranger to suffering. We have experienced extreme suffering in our lives. We have felt pain. And we're not here to compare who's suffering as which. But if we want to go to a token of extreme suffering and a book that has changed so many lives, the book I just finished, it sold over 12 million copies. It's in 24 different languages. And I feel like it's this universal truth for all of humanity. And the book was Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And in one of the statements that I pulled out of that book, it says, those who know how close the connection is between state of mind and man, his courage and hope or lack of them, and the state of immunity of his body will understand that the sudden loss of hope and courage can have a deadly effect. Now here, Viktor Frankl, who was a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, a neurologist, and a philosophy student, he created this concept, and he started looking for the significance on why we as humans need to find meaning and significance in our lives. And he developed this, and he started developing this idea in his at a young age, so in his early 20s and 30s. And then at 37, he was thrown into the concentration camps during the Holocaust. And he bounced from 4 different concentration camps. And so much of the story of Man's Search for Meaning is him reflecting on one of the deepest atrocities of suffering that we have experienced. I mean, those stories from the concentration camps. I mean, that is the extreme suffering. We get in these comparison wars about what's the worst suffering. Well, everybody can kind of agree the concentration camps are pretty high up there.
Yeah.
And in that, he saw over and over and over again that death happened not to the people who just physically were smaller or weaker, not as well developed or something as somebody. It wasn't about that. It had everything to do with their mindset.
Yeah,
with their feeling of hopelessness, with their feeling of significance or meaning or seeing anything beyond it. And so much of our physical health and well-being is a direct reflection of our mental and emotional health and well-being.
And you think about just the equalizer of what these concentration camps were. I mean, you had doctors and janitors working next to each other. And you have... I've read this book in my 20s. I'm looking forward to reading it again. But just having flashbacks of how, what he saw was when you gave up on hope, your body starts to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's on like an immune system lymphatic level. Your mind goes into, and you've talked about this on the podcast in survival mode, you kind of shut certain portions of function down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only bare necessity. And your mind starts operating in different ways. You start thinking about things a little differently. And just the impact of how your mind responds to those types of horrors would define whether your likelihood of making it through that moment or not. Just it shows you the importance of having hope, of creating hope in your life, of having something to be hopeful for. Mm-hmm. Nobody gets to say what that is for you. That's kind of your fingerprint, is what brings you hope, what brings you joy. And then asking yourself, what are you doing to bring that into your life on a daily basis? I mean, I have to. That's one of the things that I remember in that book was he was always looking for that possibility, in a way, that curiosity of what could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that willingness to create what is. As we were talking about this, we were talking about how your narration of your life is a direct reflection of your reality. It's, again, this isn't negating the negativity. I can narrate my life, and I can narrate my life story and share the pain that I have experienced in my life. I can share my life story, and I can narrate it and share those times of questioning, of challenging, of fear, of anger, of sadness. And I can have all of that be a narration of my story. But when my narration becomes, I'm unworthy because of this, or nobody listens to me, and nobody hears what I have to say. Nobody cares about what I have to say.
Sometimes I just want to escape.
Yeah, I'm just going to escape. It doesn't really matter. When we start creating that becomes our reality. Those are those words that keep echoing back and that become physical manifestations in our body.
That's the message that the body is receiving, is I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't want to try. And so the first opportunity that the body has to fulfill that, it occurs. I mean, I'm reading a book by Bernie Siegel called Peace, Love, and Healing. And, he's a doctor, and, he sees patients. And what he's talking about is those outliers, those things that doctors can't explain. She didn't do chemotherapy, and the tumor
disappeared.
Still shrunk or disappeared. And he talks about how, in his book, the psychological impact of kind of coming to grips with the cause of their life, their purpose in some ways, how they had shielded or put, basically it feels like, sometimes, and I've done this before in my own life, where you almost just take a wet sheet and you put it over your hope, like it's not gone, but nothing's coming out. You're just 9 to 5 in it. Whatever you got to do it.
Going on autopilot and losing some of that zest for life and that light and spark.
Yeah. And the thing about that is you can only do that so much. It's like that vice. It can only hold so much before it starts, and you keep squeezing it, it'll start to break and squeeze and splinter that piece of wood. So it takes the right type of, too much pressure is it's destructive. And that's going on inside of our own bodies. And it's amazing how, one of the things that he talks about is, and I think Viktor Frankl would kind of echo this, is the value of a form of trauma that kind of helps you push through and recognize the value and importance of today. Viktor Frankl had every moment, every day, he had to fight for his life. The people that Bernie Siegel is talking to, these are cancer patients that have 3 to 6 months to live. Like, they are dealing with, there's no more baloney anymore. You don't get to play dress up anymore in these types of situations. You have to be really real with your situation, and the impact of your mindset and how you think about yourself and those that are giving you help, and whether you're willing to receive help. I mean, that's the other big piece, is just willing to receive help. I mean, I've had to learn that, of being willing to let go and let somebody else take care of me. That's a lesson that is so difficult to learn, and it can be learned by having a stroke, or it can be learned by realizing, okay, I don't get to tell my kid to do everything. I have to start letting go and just trusting that there are those around us that love us and will take care of us, and that it's all going to be okay. We'll have to see.
Yeah, when I pull, a quick section here in Viktor Frankl's book, it talks about, the meaning of life. He says, I doubt whether a doctor can answer this question in general terms. For the meaning of life differs from man to man, from day to day, and from hour to hour. What matters, therefore, is not the meaning of life in general, but rather the specific meaning of a person's life at a given moment. And that's a different way to look at this. So I love this analogy he lays out. He says, to put the question in general terms would be comparable to the question posed to a chess champion. Tell me, master, what is the best move in the world? There simply is no such thing as the best or even a good move apart from a particular situation in a game and the particular personality of one's opponent. And the same holds for human existence. One should not search for an abstract meaning of life. Everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life to carry out a concrete assignment which demands fulfillment. Therein he cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated. Thus, everyone's task is as unique as his specific opportunity to implement it. As each situation in life represents a challenge to man and presents a problem for him to solve, the question of the meaning of life may actually be reversed. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that he is who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. And I love the way that is laid out, because when we try to grapple with, where is my hope? What is my meaning? What is my significance? We often look for that big, lofty thing that can say everything.
Yeah.
If you want that, let it be love. What's your meaning? To love and be loved. Go for that. That's a universal that brings way more goodness into your life. It doesn't negate that suffering will happen or that you may have hard times in your journey. But to love and be loved is a great one.
Because you can do it in any vocation, as a parent,
Right. As
an employee, as a manager. But that value of knowing, I think what I love about that is that you can have an idea of what your purpose is going to be like, but life will ultimately drum that out of you. You don't get to necessarily choose. I mean, I did the hardships that I've experienced in my life have allowed me to pivot and given me the wisdom and knowledge to pivot to another lifestyle that I never even knew was possible, but I never would have explored if it hadn't been for a great pain. And I mean, Siegel talks about people seeing cancer as their greatest teacher, and their the greatest thing that ever happened to them, because it showed them how to live. It taught them how important it was to take every day. And I have appreciated that in recent times, just the value of taking every single day and not for granted, just appreciating it and enjoying it and letting what comes next, it will come.
Right. He says in Dr. Siegel's book, Peace, Love, and Healing, which, for the record, both of these are old books. These are not, fresh publications. They've been impacting people for years and years and years here. I think, let's see, Siegel's book.
Yeah, he's in the 90s.
Yeah, it was in 97, I think, was the original. But he says in here, when it comes to dealing with our symptoms, our physical symptoms that show up, he says the message has nothing to do with guilt, sin, failure, or a lack of the will to live. Our bodies know better than that, even if our minds do not. Within each of us is the knowledge that we all must die someday. Those people who see dying as their failure to hold death at bay do not know what success is. A successful life is not about not dying. It's about living well. I have known 2-year-olds and 9-year-olds who have changed people and even entire communities by their ability to love, and their lives were successful, though short. On the other hand, I have known many who lived much longer and left behind nothing but emptiness. So when we talk about feeling unworthy, feeling unheard, these are the narratives that can become so much your identity that's your first step is to the direct reflection of how this manifests in other ways in your life. Whether that is the breakdown of the relationships around you, the breakdown of your physical health. There's so much that happens based on those stories we tell ourselves within, those things we hold on to. I recognize that the changing of the seasons is such a beautiful thing, and we recognize that things are fleeting. And for that reason, I'm going to bask in happiness when it comes, because I know that on the other side, and part of why I appreciate that happiness and joy is because I felt the pain and the sorrow. Mm-hmm. And so when that pain and that sorrow may come back in my life, I also say, okay, this too shall pass. And I can look forward to the day that I find the happy. And so how can I get to that again? And so we're letting them go and letting them flow through our bodies versus holding them in. When I see this, I am unheard, instead of I am unheard, I will be heard. Mm-hmm. I can be heard. My words have value. And as we start to say that and believe it in ourselves, it exhibits a whole other energy. I mean, we give off a whole other energy and approach.
I mean, when you see somebody who just exudes that kind of confidence, and you're like, oh, I wish I could just walk in there and do that. Mm-hmm. Well, that person is just like you. They have the same fears. They have the same anxieties. They have the same concerns. The biggest difference is that they've learned to navigate through and know that on the other side of that, once they start to challenge and pressure that, there's going to be a whole new world and perspective. I mean, our whole relationship was based off of just us being willing to challenge and kind of debate with each other.
Right.
And that spurred on, something that has become very, very beautiful. And, we don't always know what that little click is. But going out and looking for it and searching for it, I mean, that's the juice.
Oh, yeah. And getting out there. I mean, that's Viktor Frankl. He created this this practice of logotherapy. And logotherapy kind of came along as the kind of the central motivating force in with Freud and Adler. So Freud had the will to pleasure, Adler had the will to power. Logotherapy with Viktor Frankl was talking about healing through meaning and finding meaning and significance in things. And he talked in his book about how, you don't just sit and philosophize your way out of agoraphobia. You face into it.
Right.
You walk out and you face strangers and you face your fear and take ownership of it.
You challenge that feeling a little bit, and you get to know it.
You step into it, and so much of our life, wanted or unwanted, the universe throws that lesson in our face. We have those opportunities to see what are we going to make from this? What can we make, or what can we learn from this, and how can we rise above this? And it oftentimes is not by avoiding philosophizing and just kind of skirting around.
I wish it was this way. Yeah.
No, our pain comes full center. The more we avoid it, the more it's going to show up in some way in our lives. And we see this over and over again. When we hear about this so much now as we're all addressing trauma and mental health in a new way based on everything that's been going on in the past few years. And there is way more conversation about the higher level. I feel like we're going out of the information era. The information era, we are so overloaded. Now we're like, we've got all the information, but what's the significance of it? What's the meaning behind it? Why? Why is it important? And what do I really need to fill my mind, body, and soul with that's gonna create a ripple effect that is something that has purpose?
Well, I'm excited because, there's a lot of, we've been trying to figure this out. Like I saw an article that said, social media is dying because we still want to find something for our community, for our society where it can thrive. It's become so loud with other things that you can't speak anymore. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to have to find a new and different way to connect. And that's unknown.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's exciting, is it's something that we haven't even figured out yet. And when it comes down the pike, it will have some terrific, horrific things that will just change the way we do life. And I think that, the being excited about what is to come has been probably the biggest shift for me, is just being able to let go of, I wish it was like this, or man, it was so nice when it was like, those good old days.
Being open to what you don't know.
Being open to what you don't know, or what could be, or how you could work with this. What does this make possible? That has changed my stress and tension and pressure level exponentially. And I think about all these people who, write to us and say, I don't feel heard. And I mean, we've been in that situation where both of us have not felt heard. And so we create a space where what does that make possible? Okay, how could I feel heard? What does that look like? Have I even explored what feeling heard looks like and defined it? And how do I start to find that in my life, and where can I go to look for that, and how can I communicate that to the ones that I love? Hey, this feels this way, or this feels that.
I can call myself out on this. I have experienced not feeling heard in my family for a multitude of reasons. For some reason, my voice, while at some points can be really loud, at other points people physically just don't hear me. I have a mousy voice, a quiet voice. I don't know. There's something where I literally have to really speak up. I know that it is one where just in my world of working with people that have been deaf and hard of hearing, it's harder to hear my tone of voice when you're hard of hearing. And so I literally will have to learn to project my voice in order for people to be heard. But when I started getting really frustrated because nobody was hearing me, I also started to pay attention to what I was saying. And it was also a time that I was highly critical. I was looking for, I was feeling overwhelmed and navigating, kind of facing parts of me that I didn't like, and not quite sure how to move away from it, but I wasn't liking the level of irritation I constantly had. And I started to pay attention to how often the words that I was saying were criticism. And that kind of brought to my awareness, well, why would anybody really want to listen when all it is me jumping down people's throats?
Well, but I think that's where humor is really critical. It's because you have to be able to laugh at yourself and not take this whole situation seriously. You have to be able to say, yeah, you know what? What can I control? I mean, if I can stop being critical and start complimenting and see if people respond that way. And, that changes the whole game. It changes the whole energy that you bring. It changes the interaction exponentially if you're giving, a warm embrace rather than a cold shoulder.
Well, it's that whole idea of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If you're sitting there
My favorite place.
Yeah, and you've got this narration going on in your head, what are you doing on repeat? Is there something that you are doing that may warrant a shift? So we have so much we can unpack. Just from our insights from reading in these two books, our experience of dealing with the struggle of physical versus mental and emotional. And oh my goodness, the amount of examples of this journey, both positive and negative, that we can pull from our own family. From our own, geesh, I mean, there's so many stories.
I mean, I was thinking about when we were first dating, and you started giving off the list of all the family ailments that you had. And I was like, oh, geez, man, sell yourself. I don't know if we could have children, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And I, looking back on it, I guess I kind of had like a we'll see approach. Yeah, we'll see. But I'm glad I had that approach.
Yeah.
But that's how you saw it back then.
And I have to, and I'll share in this, when my mother turned 50, she hit not only midlife crisis of turning 50 and looking at, okay, who am I and what do I want to be in my life? She also was dealing with empty nest. I was her youngest, and I was leaving to go to college this year. And she also, not surprisingly, started to have physical symptoms Those physical symptoms manifested into multiple sclerosis. She was diagnosed the day I started college. It was a rough year. And it was a very rough year for our whole family. And we had lots of ups and downs of just figuring out this place where my mom, who was the, Susie homemaker extraordinaire, all of a sudden is going, well, who am I other than Jared, Kevin, and Ashley's mom and Dan's wife? Who is Joanne? Who am I? And as she started to check that, we had lots of life changes that changed in a beautiful way. My mom faced a lot of her past. She went through the hard work of looking at herself and what can she do differently. She talks about how she has enabling down to a fine art, and it's been a struggle. She learned about setting boundaries and working on that. And she shifted her lifestyle. And that Nathan has talked many times on here about how he thought it was so crazy how both my parents napped every day and how silly that was. And we talked about the importance of sleep last week. Oh, my mom shifted her life. And instead of running on fumes for everyone else, she recognized how much that nap in the afternoon recharged her and allowed her to go. And at this point now, 23 years later, my mom shows no signs of MS. And people are scratching their heads and don't really know exactly what happened, but her x-rays, the myelin sheath that shows the MS signs are gone. And I look at that and I say so much. I know the mom at 50 and I know the mom now, and what she did and how her physical ailments have shifted has been a direct result and and I can tell you, I know exactly when every time she had any MS attacks, 150% due to mental and emotional stress. Every time. It was when she pushed herself too far, when she didn't draw the boundaries, when she didn't pay attention to herself. When we show up in this world, our body is just one point of showing up. If we aren't mentally and emotionally able to show up as well, there's that disconnect, and our body's going to start going, hey, wait a second, we're not all together here. And you're going to get checked.
Yeah. Am I the only one carrying all this weight?
Yeah.
And then it cracks.
Right.
And so that's the important part. That's the lesson, is that you have complete control over that. And that's the dangerous thing, is you have complete control over that.
So this week, our challenge to you is simply to pay attention to your narrative. What is your narrative saying that is fueling you toward hope and meaning and significance in your life? What narratives may be holding you back? And bring awareness to it. Simply bring awareness to what narratives you have in your life and what patterns you have seen. And I would love to hear from you. I want to know, are you stuck in a narrative? Are you seeing the same patterns? And maybe it's, my husband does this over and over and over again, and this is the pattern. Well, dig a little deeper. Why? Where are they coming from? What are you doing when they give that response? So what I'm looking for is digging deep. Why, to the point you get to me, not them, but me. What am I then repeating because of my external circumstances or whatever? Because I love Frankl's analogy of the chess player, because it's so true. It's not about finding it overall or anything. You are a pawn playing around a lot of other people. And so those variables and those things out of your control are constantly there. We can't fix all of that, but we can work with what we have, and that's within first. So start looking at what that narrative is and what patterns you're repeating in your life. And next week, we're going to dig into 13 key elements we believe will keep you healthy. So stay tuned to next episode. And remember, the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us. Namaste.
1, 2, 3. Up with the rising sun, already on the run. Mama says namaste. Life is a tangled mess, and you don't have to stress. Mama says namaste. 'Cause today I will stand up and be all the change that I want to see in this world. Boys and girls, you gotta have to stand up to be free. Namaste in your heart. Take a deep breath in and let's start a brand new day. With Mama says namaste.